When does the convention start?
I don't know the day, the 15th, somewhere around the 12th of September, I believe. We have a brochure out there with all the dates and what's happening. I'll make sure you get one. Okay? This is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York, the 2nd of September 2003, approximately 12:45.
2004.
2004. What did I say? 2003. Okay. Approximately 12:45. The interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Charles A. Diehl, D-I-E-H-L, born 11/22/23 in Secaucus, New Jersey.
All right. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Just high school, St. Michael's High School, Union City.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes. I was spending the weekend at our second home that my father had purchased in Sparta, New Jersey. And I went out to the car because there was no electricity there, turned on the radio and heard the news. That was like about 1:30, December 7th.
Was there a lot of people milling around the streets talking about it? Was there a lot of excitement?
No, this was no electricity, no telephone. December, not many people in lakeside homes or what have you.
What was your reaction?
I was just pissed off that they had a sneak attack, which I didn't think was the right way to fight a war. That bothered me the most. And it still haunts me, you know. I think they were in Washington talking about peace terms, and they got planes in the air. But I joined the Navy.
Now, did you enlist?
Yeah, I enlisted in the Navy.
When did you enlist?
January 23rd, 1943.
Now, why did you select the Navy?
I didn't want to be in a foxhole with people dropping things on me. And I felt that I was more at home around the water. After boot camp.
Now, where did you go for your boot camp?
Sampson, New York.
Now, did you pick submarines, or how did you end up on a sub?
They sent me to torpedo school in Newport, Rhode Island, Company 1219, and that lasted about 3 months. Near the end of the period, they took all of the members of the school class and had them tested for the qualifications physically
Mhm.
that the submarine service wanted. I think there were 120 sailors that were in the submarine class or torpedo room class that I was in, and 12 of us passed it. And they sent me down to New London.
What did you do at New London?
Well, I was in Spritzer's Navy. I don't know if you ever heard of Spritzer's Navy,
No.
but he was a chief, and he handled all of those people that were coming into New London for submarine school. And he was quite a disciplinarian. And I stayed there in the Navy, Spritzer's Navy, and they do menial tasks around the base. And I was finally admitted to the submarine school, which took maybe about, I'm not sure, a month and a half. And they assigned me to an older submarine which was used, named the 04, hull number 65, which was the second oldest submarine in the submarine service. And they used those O-boats that were built in 1918 for school class instruction. And we would take a class from the submarine school out on the boat and give them an indoctrination into submarines. We only went down the Thames River into Long Island Sound. We had a class in the morning and a class in the afternoon. Made 4 dives, which weren't very deep. The water was only about 90 foot. And we would come back in the afternoon, and it was good duty. And I was on the 04 for maybe about a year and a half, and then they transferred me to a boat being refinished up in Portsmouth Navy Yard, the Manta Ray, sometime in the fall of '44. And while the Portsmouth Navy Yard put the final touches on the Manta, we received all of the equipment necessary to make it a fighting boat. And then went out for sea trials. Went down to Newport and went on the torpedo firing range seeing if our torpedo tubes were lined up. And
Now, how did they do that?
well, they would put us out on the range and we would fire at a buoy. And after we passed through that exam, we went back up to Portsmouth Navy Yard because our reduction gears were noisy. This was a boat that was built down in Cramp, or keel laid in Cramp shipyards in Philadelphia. I think there were maybe about 8 boats down there. And Cramp shipyard went bankrupt. So the Navy took what was there of the boats and they sent them to different yards. Some went to Portsmouth Navy Yard and some went to Boston for completion. After we went through those tests, we headed south for Panama. I remember being down in Panama April 12, 1945, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed away. And then we headed for the...
What was the reaction of the crew to that?
You know, it's funny, you took these things in stride, and at that time, Hitler was praising the fact that he passed away, and I thought later on that when Hitler passed away, or he committed suicide before the end of the month, that little did he think that he was that close to being passing on. We then went through the canal and arrived in Pearl Harbor. All the while we were going through tests with the boat. After exiting the Panama Canal, we went into the Pacific just offshore, and we did some torpedo firing with some DEs playing cat and mouse. They looking for us and we trying to get firing range on them. We then headed for Pearl, and all the while we're doing more testing and getting the crew ready to go out on patrol. You want me to continue?
Yes.
The must have been sometime in the end of June that we headed for Midway, where we refueled and then continued.
How long could you stay out at sea before you refueled?
We would stay out for the full period without refueling. We could, I think we were good for about 9,000 nautical miles. Had that much fuel on board. And they sent us up into the Kuril Islands. That's off the northern shore of the islands of Japan. And that's up there where the Russians shot down an airliner.
Yes, right, yes.
Maybe about,
10 or so.
that's just the general area. And it was, they said that the airplane went off course.
Yes, I remember that.
And they had a lot of mines in the area because there was an inlet to the Sea of Japan. And it was just about that time that they sent 8 boats into the Sea of Japan, which was called the Japanese bathtub. Of the 8 boats, 7 of them came out, and we were plotting the mines on the entrance to this to get into the Sea of Japan. Then we went up to an island base that they had up in the northern Kurils called Paramashuro, and we entered the harbor there. We were down about 18 hours that day, observing with the scope what was going on.
How long could you stay under? You had a snorkel, right? So,
No,
oh, your submarine did not have a snorkel?
no,
Okay.
snorkels come out later.
That's it.
We had to come up to charge batteries.
What was the maximum time that you could stay under?
I think the longest time one boat stayed under was 37 hours. But that was the longest time that I stayed down, 18 hours. A cigarette wouldn't stay lit after being down for maybe about 8 or 10 hours all low.
Was that because of a lack of oxygen?
Yeah. But we seen a couple Russian ships up there, but nothing to shoot at. Everything was pretty much shot up then. There wasn't many Jap ships around. And most of the action was south anyway, because they were getting ready to attack Okinawa. And we got back in to Midway, and it was cold up in even though it was June and July. I always wore, when I went topside to play lookout, I remember always wearing wool-lined boots, and foggy too. You'd be in a fog and you couldn't see. You could just barely see the front end of the boat. All of a sudden you'd come right out into a clear blue sky. You felt naked out there, you know, because you couldn't see anybody and they couldn't see you, but all of a sudden, and you were really aware and looking around, you know, if there's anybody that, but after about 45 days we headed back from Midway, and I transferred off to a subtender, Bushnell. And while I was on there, that was during April 6th and April 9th when they dropped the bombs.
Now, what was the reaction when you heard about those?
Well, we're going home, you know. And it was very quickly. I was surprised how fast they turned everything around, and the Bushnell headed for Pearl Harbor. I got transferred off because I didn't have that much time in the Pacific, as well as a lot of the other fellows were out there from maybe the beginning of the war. And they transferred me on to the Aiger, A-I-G-E-R, another subtender. I wasn't on that but about a week, and they decided to send her back also. I was glad I didn't stay on as Bushnell, because in Pearl, I'm sure a lot of those guys got transferred off, and people with longer time out there took their place. And the Aiger went right back to Frisco, and they set up a base for all the submarines coming back with a couple of the tenders. It's funny, I find it hard then to remember some of the names of where we were. But we would take a Liberty boat from the base there, which was on the other side of the bridge. And he'd tie up in Market Street, and we'd take Liberty and then catch the boat back at night. So
whereabouts were you when the war ended?
Midway. The when I got to a telephone, I called home and got the sad news that my father was really sick and didn't have long to live. So I asked to get a leave, which was granted. And I guess I got home about just around like today, September sometime, the 2nd, because the Missouri was heading for Tokyo Bay, and they signed the peace papers on September 15th. And my dad passed away on the 25th of September. And I asked to be discharged. You had to have enough points. They were counting points. And they sent me out to Camp Shoemaker, and I was discharged in January of '45.
Now, what rank were you when you were discharged?
Torpedoman 3rd.
Okay.
Well, what was the difference between the '04 boat you were on and the Manta Ray? I mean, there must have been a lot of difference because the one was built during World War I. What were the differences in it?
Well, number one was the length. And they were looking for boats that they could teach the submarine school students. And these were old boats because I wasn't on a boat a couple months, and that they took it in for overhaul. There was a small repair yard on the other side of the river from the base, and they put the '04 in the dry dock, and we set about scraping the hull down with chip and hammers and what have you. And I remember one day one of the guys was down on the keel of the boat operating an air hammer right through the hole. The chief of the boat says, "Okay, put a patch on it." And you went out again. Of course, the water wasn't deep anyway. But I guess the boat was maybe about maybe 170 feet long. And they only had 18-inch tubes rather than the 21-inch torpedo tubes that the Manta had. And there were only 4 forward tubes anyway, whereas the Manta had 6 forward and 4 in the after room.
Did they have torpedo men in the forward and the aft areas, or did you have to move from one to the other?
No, there was just crews set up. First class was in the after torpedo room where I was. And in the forward room there was a first class also.
Mhm.
And
How long did it take you to load a torpedo into a tube and get ready to fire? By the time they told you they were going to fire until you actually did fire, how long did it take you to load a tube? Approximately.
I'd say about 5 minutes.
How did you feel the first time you went under in a submarine? You said you didn't want to go into foxholes. You went into a tube underwater.
You know, it didn't bother me. I accepted it as it was.
Mhm.
After I got home, I joined the submarine vets of World War II in New Jersey, and the group was rather active down there, and they had a chance to get a submarine which they wanted to put up as a museum in Hackensack, New Jersey. And company volunteered their tugboat, and they went over to Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we brought the Ling, sister ship to the one I was on, 297 boat Ling, and tied it up in the Hackensack River in Hackensack, New Jersey. Brought that boat over January 13th, 1973. And it's still open today as a museum. They have Sea Cadets and Boy Scouts that stay over down there, and they teach them a little of the history. And it's a nice museum park.
Now, did you join any other veterans organizations after?
Yeah,
service?
I joined American Legion,
Mhm.
and I belong to the Lake George chapter of American Legion.
Now, after you left service, did you ever make use of the GI Bill?
Yeah, I went into an aircraft school, learned both aircraft and engine, and got a FAA license for both aircraft and engine repair.
Mhm.
But the pay wasn't that good, so I didn't last too long on that.
Did you learn how to fly also?
Yeah, later on in life, after I went in business, I had a couple bucks more, and I joined a club, and we had about 3 or 4 aircraft, and you would call and make a reservation, I put in about 600 hours on light aircraft. Got the different ratings. And then I bought an airplane. I bought a Twin Beach. Made a couple trips south, out to the Bahamas with the kids. Flying out of Teterboro.
Mhm.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was on your boat with you?
Yeah, I got an old menu of some holiday, and I had the names of all these guys. And I would look them up, write letters to them, and told them I was going to have a reunion. Had one in Orlando, and also had one in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And I call them up occasionally. It's nice to talk to them. Although they're passing away now little by little. They understand we lose about 1,000 a day.
Yeah. How do you think your time in the service had a change or affect your life?
I don't know, with was a few years, and you know, after high school, you're still not much of a grown-up. You're still a kid, and I guess when you go into service, you grow up a lot in a different environment. I think it was good for me. And after not staying in the aircraft industry at all, I bought a business, and made a living doing that. And then I got out of that business and get into another one. I guess I've had maybe about 4 or 5 businesses. Not all of them as good as what I would expect or should have it. But around 1986, I sold my house down in New Jersey and moved up to Lake George into the second home that we owned. And it's been nice living up there.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Okay.